Right. So I'm going to discuss about different type of architectures. Let us understand solution architecture first. Let me brief you again. Solution architecture is something essentially important when we want to develop any solution for applications. So this is nothing to do with any technology. This is nothing to do with domain. Irrespective of technology and the domain, understanding the architecture for any application, providing subsequently solutions is something essentially important in the field of IT. Now, in regard to the people who wants to transform their career towards the architecture role, this is important for us to understand about what are the different type of architectures we have. Normally, from the larger context, if we see, architectures will be categorized into four different parts, because architectures, we have many architectures like solution architecture as final. So if it is cloud applications and all, cloud architecture. If it's a DevOps platform, DevOps architecture. In the manner, when we are going to develop any projects, usually perception towards architectures will be categorized into four different parts. So one is business oriented, second is developer focused, third is vendor oriented, and fourth is operations focused. Business oriented, majorly focusing on the business aspects of the organization, right? So because there will be multiple roles as business architects are there, right? So business architects major responsibility is to understand the process and as well as functionality of the business architecture or a business process flow. uh, Let me give you an example. So I'll take an example to you, because from this class onwards, what I'm going to do from this class, in the beginning itself, I'm going to take a case study first. Okay. Whatever the examples I'm going to give you from the architectural point of view, everything is relating to the case study, so that there will be a discipline. Because in spite of it, if I'm using different examples in regular intervals, then it will not be much effective to the people, and it may leads to confusion even. So hence I'm taking a project or a case study, whatever the name you can call it is. Right. So I'll take a project, and whatever the explanation I'm going to give you, whatever the diagrams are we going to prepare in future, so everything is relating to the particular case study. Okay, this is what I must tell you. This is a disclaimer before. Now, so what is business focus? Business focus majorly focus on the business aspects of the organization. So for example, I'm just taking a functional case study. Okay, I'm not going in deep of it, because ours is solution architecture. End of the day, I'm not going more functional, but to give an example and all, I'm taking some case study to you, right? So that we can relate it. So on that grounds, I am allowed to give you some explanation about the case study. Now, this is what generally the case study I have taken. Okay, you can see this case study. You don't require this case study in detail, but I'll give you an overall understanding. So there is an organization called Bidding Shop Systems. Is an organization. It's a product-based company, I can say. So these people have experience in the field of providing in-store solutions for a very long time. In-store solution means, let's say that if you take any retail store, let me put you this way. If there is any retail store, so this retail store have different departments, right? So they have billing department, they have inventory management system. At the same time, they have even payroll management, right? HR department will be there, finance, right? So different departments will be there. Now, whenever we are working, whenever we are working from the business point of view, when we try to understand, Bidding Shop Systems wants to develop some cloud-based point of sale system or a point of sale system. This is what generally the perception is. So what exactly the problem is? Problem is that existing organizations, because normally projects will be categorized into three different parts. Because as you guys were working for the field of IT even, let me give you an example to you. Let's say that when we are working for the projects, usually projects will be categorized into three different parts. One is customer will give you the requirements from the beginning. and customer will explain us the business problem. We develop the application from the scratch, right from 0 to 100. This is the structure. Second, there are existing product or a project which is using by the customer, and customer want us to make some changes in the existing application, some customization required. This is second level. Third type of projects are, there are some legacy systems, legacy applications like using mainframe application by a retail store, by any customer for a very long time. Now they want to transform their legacy applications to the new application, right? So most of the projects, if we see nowadays, of course, prominently, you might have come across that. Most of the projects were legacy to new on-premise or cloud-based application. That's how generally most of the projects were belongs to. So here there is a lot of requirement in terms of the data migration is needed. So these we call it as migration projects. Okay, migration projects. So these are the three different areas. Now let us assume that Bidding Shop Systems is a product-based company. They wants to develop some cloud-based point of sale system for the customer. Now let's say from the business followed by the technical aspects. Okay, let me put some solution architect role in some time later, because business architect will come, a solution architect will come, then we provide whatever the hardware and so whatever the requirements like functional or non-functional, that time business architects come into, solution architects come into picture. Prior to that, there are some business aspects which we need to understand, means the organization structure, the kind of process which is involved in the organization. At the same time, whatever the value systems, principles that organization follows, at the same time, their business model, their competitors, their goals, vision, mission, all these areas are something essentially important. So the case study is something that we have taken a case study which is called point of sale system. Point of sale system, nothing but billing system, right? When we go to the shop, we buy the products. Whenever we buy the products, against to that, we do the billing. So whatever the biller is performing in the counter, that itself is called point of sale system. So assume that we are going to develop a point of sale system. That was the project. Okay, I am taking this as an example for the whole course so that you will have an understanding, because when I'm giving examples to you, technically, functionally, so that you can relate easily, because giving other examples in different areas would be such difficult. So there won't be any discipline further. So this is what the case study. I am just closing here. Okay. Now, when it comes to the organizational structure level, where I told you business focused majorly on the business architecture level. At the same time, enterprise architecture level. This enterprise architecture will be categorized into 4 different parts, because we have enterprise architecture, we have solution architecture. Okay, solution architecture comes next, enterprise architecture comes first. Okay, understand the difference, because we need to have a clear understanding about these two for sure, right? So that sort of difference is required. So enterprise architecture comes first, solution architecture comes next. What enterprise architecture consists of? Enterprise architecture, nothing but the business process as well as the communication among the departments, whichever is running for a particular enterprise, is called business architecture. Now, if you have taken a retail store, what are the departments we have? We have finance department, we have HR, we have supply chain, we have inventory department, we have front office, we may have CRM, customer relationship management department might be there. There are different departments and different processes they are working on. So whenever we are working on the processes, there are some applications and systems we are using which are interconnected. So when we talk about enterprise architecture majorly focusing on 4 areas. One is business architecture, which majorly focusing on the business aspects like business goal, vision, mission, right? So strategy, tactics of the organization, what is that they follow. All these comes under business architecture, point number 1. Point number 2, application architecture. Application architecture means what are the applications we are using. Let's say if you have taken a retail store, there are different applications we use. Something like point of sale system is being used here. At the same time, apart from point of sale system, we may use inventory management system. right? At the same time, we may using HR payroll management system or CRM applications. So different applications we use. Even though whatever the applications are we using, these applications will have some interconnect, right? Because let's say that a person wants to do billing, right? So a person wants to do billing, what is that they have to do? First of all, they have to access the system. So on what basis they will access the system? Based on the employee ID number or employee details, whichever is given by the employer to them. So from where this access of information we are gathering? We are gathering this access of information from the payroll management system itself. So when we talk about application architecture, group of applications, integration of applications is all comes under application architecture. Because point of sale system, whatever we are developing is a piece of work within the whole organization. If you have taken organization as a retail store as separate, assume that there are 4 different applications they are using, right? So one is for billing, second is to inventory management, maybe third is for customer relationship management, maybe 4 is for payroll management to manage employees, etc. Now, what is that we have to do? In what way point of sale system we want to develop? If we are trying to understand the requirements from the point of sale system perspective, in what way these are interconnected with other applications? Because the changes we are making in the existing application might also indirectly impacting the other system. Let's say you are making some changes in the point of sale system, right? So when your point of sale system will be more active, point of sale system will be active and accurate as long as you have an effective inventory management system, right? So when we're talking about applications, there are different applications. Either it can be legacy applications or on-premise applications or cloud applications, anything it can be. So integration among these applications is what one have to understand, right? So this is where business, second application architecture come into picture. The third one about infrastructure or systems application, systems architecture, we can say, like what kind of systems they were using, right? So about the infrastructure, right? So all these are comes under systems architecture. Last but not least, data, how the data is being stored, right? So where are we accessing the data? What kind of data are we receiving? So all these 4 are comes under enterprise architecture. This is where generally we call it as enterprise architecture stands for. So when we're talking about enterprise architect, mostly enterprise architect are the people we see in real world who have knowledge over the functionality as well as technicality. Because business architects roles will be a separate, of course, that's a functional role. I'm not getting into more into that because our cup of tea is not that. Next is application architecture. Application architecture, majorly technical leads will try to understand this application architecture and all everything, right? So this is the second level. Third, about systems architecture. Systems architecture means where majorly whatever the systems are we going to use and how these configurations and all means people who are relating to the system administration side will be managed about systems architecture, all that. At the same time, even database professionals will take up database architecture, all that, right? So when we're trying to understand about business perspective in any application development we see, because these are all the architectures which we don't see when we are working on coding, right? So because whenever we write code for any application, normally we get the documents, right? So we get some business requirement documents or some functional and non-functional requirement documents we get. So based on the documentation, or else nowadays we are working on user stories because in agile environment we are writing user stories nowadays. Either it can be Jira or Azure DevOps, whatever the tools are we using now. So using those user stories and all implementation we are doing. That's how generally the perception has been developed. But end of the day, when we try to understand the requirements or whenever we are trying to develop the application, there must be a parallel system of architecture which has to be developed in parallel to that. Because if there are any changes to be made, right? So this architecture should be in such a way, it should be flexible enough to make some necessary changes into that. Are you following everyone? Clear? Aishwarya and Manoj, Ramakrishna. Clear?
Yes, sir. Following
Yes,
clear,
yes,
clear.
sir.
So
Following, yes.
Yeah. So because there are some interrelativity is something essentially required. This is where something we need to understand. This is all something we need to understand from the business perspective. Let's say we are developing a point of sale system. I'm taking the same example throughout, okay, so that there will be discipline as I said. Let's say we are developing a point of sale system. When we are developing a point of sale system, if you see closely, because it is not something technically you don't need to bother about it. Let's say, for example, we go to shopping. What we do now, whenever we go to shopping, simply we buy the products. We sit, we stand in front of the counter, billing counter. Billing person will take the products and they scan the product. When they scan the product, automatically product name will be displayed, followed by this unit price will be displayed. How it is displayed? Because point of sale system application is connected with inventory management system. Point number one, right? So there is an interconnect. Point number one. Point number two, point of sale system accessing by whom? This is being accessed by the billing person. Am I right? How billing person is accessing the application? Because using his login credentials. On what basis login credentials has been created? Based on his employment. Am I right? So if you want to access the records and all everything, using his employee details, he has to access it. Where these employee details were registered, this employee registered was registered in the payroll management system. So if you are making any point of sale system application, assume that there are some two dependencies we have. This is where generally we call it as software components and hardware components. In the component structure we see in the field of application development, we call it as hardware and software components. We call it as normally, right? What is hardware component here? Hardware component means barcode readers, scanners, right? So what you can see, these are hardware components. What are software components here? There are two applications. One is payroll management system. Second is inventory management system. Why? Because if you want to make your point of sale system effective, what is that we required? A person who is operating the point of sale system should access the details using their employee details. So where it was stored, it will be stored in the payroll management system. Second, when we are trying to access the information about the products, because whenever we scan the product, automatically product name is displaying. How it was displayed? Because it was connected with inventory management system. Okay, so this is where generally this business applications and system data, all these were interconnected. So when we are trying to understand an application first, and before we are getting into the solution architecture, it is always important for us to understand the business orientation. This is what generally we call it as business focused. Point number one. Point number two, developer focused. You know well, because being a developers, when we are working on application, when we write code, right, when we prepare user interface designs and all that, because normally we'll be aligned with three different layers. One we call it as presentation layer, because three-layer architecture, I'm saying this, right? So we have presentation layer as separate. We have a middle tier, at the same time data layer, right? So business or logic layer, I can say, in middle. So when we are creating user interfaces or when we are trying to connect database and all everything to access the applications, all that, what is that we required? We require to have a knowledge over data architecture. This is where generally developer focused is. Means whatever the software we are developing, whatever the applications are we developing, whatever the data are we working on, all these are comes under data architecture. Data architecture, software architecture, applications architecture and all. So these are all something relating to the developer focused. You can see over here, I'll draw this, right? So when you see this enterprise architecture here, business architecture is part of it, software architecture is part of it, application architecture is part of it, data architecture is also part of it. So whatever these, right? So these are everything are connected to the enterprise architecture, right? So this is where business focused and as well as developer focused are involved in it. Third one, operation focused. What is meant by operation focused? Let's say you have developed an application. End of the day, non-functional requirements are also important because non-functional. What is meant by non-functional? What is meant by non-functional? Anyone, please. Non-functional requirements also important. Because functionalities, what is that we write code is called functional requirements. Now, what is meant by non-functional then? What does it mean?
Performance wise.
Non-functional, nothing but performance, scalability, reliability,
High availability.
accessibility, right? Load balancing,
Yeah.
fault tolerancing, all that.
Yeah.
So, characteristic of a particular functional application is called non-functional requirements, right? Let's say, I'll give you an example. We are developing a point of sale system for one of the retail customer. Now, it's always important for us to develop point of sale system which must be effective enough to use it. It is important. But at the same time, whenever we are developing the application, we need to consider the non-functional requirements also. What is meant by non-functional? Let's say a customer is using point of sale system in the retail store. Every day, almost 300 to 400 people were coming for billing, right? At the same time, it is doubled at the time in the weekends. That's what customer has said. Now, whenever we try to understand the system level architecture or system level implementation, or when we are preparing software requirement specification for the particular business functionality, what is that you consider? So based on the inflow, based on the traffic, which is being heated for the point of sale system, what kind of configuration of this, what kind of hardware and as well as software configuration is needed? It's something we have to be focused more on. Point number one. Point number two, we need to make sure the application must be secure enough because people are using their cards to do the payments. People are doing some scanning and through wallet payments. They are doing some scanning and they're paying, etc. All that. Right. So this is where generally customer data is being accessing by our systems. This is where security is more important because the data has to be secure in such a way that should not be breached by in any other means. This is where generally security architecture is important, especially when we work for healthcare projects, whenever we are working for banking, whenever we are working for financial related, means capital markets, right? Financial services. When we are working on that area, it's always important for us to understand about security architecture for sure. Because you need to develop security architecture for the project where this infrastructure people will take care of all that, right? So this is where generally it is. So this is all operation focused. Operation focused means when we want to use the application, it's not only user friendly, but these applications must be strong enough so that we can use it easily because site reliability is important, right? At the same time, security of the application is so important. At the same time, network architecture is also important. At the same time, cloud architect. Cloud architect means, let's say that, for example, we are working a cloud-based point of sale system, right? We are not developing an on-premise, assume that. We are developing a cloud-based point of sale system. So what is meant by cloud-based means application we are developing in the cloud environment by using different cloud service providers. Either it can be AWS, it can be Azure, it can be Google Cloud, right? So it can be of anything, IBM, right? Whatever it is. Different cloud service providers we are working on. Now, whenever we are working on these cloud service providers, we can have a choice that we can use any of the option because normally these cloud services falls under three categories. One is AWS, second is PWS, third is SWS. Following everyone. Following or not?
Yes.
Right?
Yes, yes.
So
Yeah.
three things. One is AWS, cloud services. Second is PWS. Third is SWS. IWS stands for infrastructure as a service. Means whatever the infrastructure is required for a project to develop, that infrastructure will be managed by the cloud service providers. The best example you can take in the real time nowadays is AWS, Amazon Web Services. Amazon Web Services is one of the prominent cloud service provider who will provide infrastructure as a service in most of the organizations, right? So most of the organizations are taking infrastructure as a service support from them. Next, platform. We need to create a platform. What is meant by platform? What does it mean? What is meant by platform? Anyone, please. What is meant by a platform? Ramakrishna.
Environment.
Platform is an environment. Is it platform we call it as environment?
Is it like which OS we are using?
Absolutely. Right. Platform, nothing but operating system. Let's say, for example, we are constructing a building. Let me give you a generalized example so that you guys can understand well. Of course, even though you guys are from IT, but let me give you, because end of the day, understandability is more important than what example are we taking. Let's say for the reason you want to construct a building. When you want to construct a building, it's not about the blueprint of the building is important. Of course, blueprint of the building is important when you're constructing it. But prior to that, what is that you require? We require a platform. We require a basement, right? So basement has to be created, because how well you have constructed, as long as your basement is not so strong, your building will not be retained forever. This is more important. So that's the reason why whenever we are developing an application, it's not only about the infrastructure, what is that we are using. End of the day, we require some platform as well. This is where generally platform as a service means we need to create a platform in such a way where whatever the operating systems are we going to use, either it can be of any operating system, right? It can be Windows, right? So normally we go for Linux systems and all, right? Unix flavor, right? Unix flavor Linux systems and all that. So creating a platform is required. At the same time, SaaS, which stands for software as a service, means what are the software are we going to develop? I'll give you an example from the Salesforce point of view, because you guys can know about Salesforce, right? Salesforce is a CRM application. They develop different CRM application services to the different customers, whoever wants. Software as a service means they provide softwares and all that. So when we are trying to understand about the cloud architecture, or when we are trying to develop the application, it's an operational focus from the cloud point of view, because there are two kind of things. One is either you have to develop, whether you have to develop on-premise application, or else it's a cloud application. Two things. One is on-premise, second is cloud application. Right? In this cloud application, again, we need to categorize three. One is public cloud. Second is hybrid cloud. I'll give you the detailed things later, okay? You don't need to worry. If you don't understand this, just leave it. Don't bother about it, right? So that what is the public, private cloud and all. When I'm going to explain about the cloud architecture, I will tell you. You don't need to worry about that. Next is private cloud. Right. So again, in this cloud applications, there are public cloud services as separate, hybrid cloud services at the same time. Private cloud services means what are the infrastructure, whatever the platform, whatever the software, everything will be developed by the cloud service provider exclusive for our own. Especially if the best example I can give you, banking applications, whatever the banking applications we develop, if there is any cloud application, if it's not on-premise, I'm saying, okay, on-premise application, we have infrastructure, that's not an issue. But when we are developing a cloud application, especially healthcare applications, especially banking and finance services related applications, they choose private cloud services. Because private cloud services means cloud service provider, either it can be AWS or it can be Azure, it can be Google Cloud, it can be IBM. These people will create an infrastructure for our services, because they have cloud architects as separate. These cloud architects' responsibility is to develop cloud architecture for the customer project, which is something relating to the private cloud, which is an expensive thing. Otherwise, public cloud. Public cloud means anybody can use that platform and they can use it accordingly. Right. So when we talk about applications, when we are developing in the cloud environment, either it can be an on-premise applications nowadays we are working on. If it's not application on-premise, we are going for cloud applications. So why are we moving towards cloud applications? Because of one reason, because cloud applications has an advantage where we have operational cost and all, everything will be very less, because we don't have much operational cost in cloud, because cloud applications are very, very economical, I can say. I don't say it is cheap. It's not the right thing to say. but it's economical nowadays because whatever the charges they will be collecting, it's based upon the need and based upon the requirement what we have used, they will be charging only for that. So why are we moving cloud environment? Because of due to the operational cost and operational burden. Right. So when we are trying to develop the application from the operations focused point of view, operation focus means end user point of view. I can say in simple ways, I can say from the end user point of view, when you're trying to understand, either it can be an on-premise application or it can be a cloud application. If it's a cloud application and all you require cloud architecture. You require cloud architecture. Network architecture is required. This is also you need it, right? So routers, firewalls, all that will be there. At the same time, site reliability, right? Security architecture. So all these are something focused on the operations perspective. Means operational effectiveness. To develop operational effectiveness, whatever the architectures are we going to develop will be involved in it. Last but not least, from the vendor perspective. Vendor perspective, whatever the development of application we are developing is called solution architect. Solution architecture means vendor perspective. Vendor means the one we are developing the application. When we are developing an application, what must be the final conclusion? We have to develop an application in such a way it has to meet the right goals and objectives of the customer. So if it does not met the right objectives of the customer, then there will be no point in developing the application. This is where generally solution architecture come into picture. But here is a question, because most of the people will have a confusion over when I teach solution architect for a very long, many of the people will have a doubt over here, because solution architecture, when we talk about, normally solution architect roles will be categorized into 3 different areas. Okay, let me put you this way. Because solution architect is not something the role you see in general. Okay, solution architecture is a broader term. Okay, solution architecture or an architect role is a broader term. Means people who provide solution will be called as solution architects. Okay, this is what it is. But normally when you talk about the solution architects, these solution architect roles will be categorized into 3 different areas. One is application solution architects. This is point number 1. Application solution architects, point number 1. Second, platform solution architects. Again, in solution architect, we have 3 variants. One is application solution architects. Second, platform solution architects. Third is infrastructure solution architects. Can you please rejoin again? The meeting is going to be ended soon. Can you please rejoin again, please? Please don't mind.
Yeah, sure.
Please rejoin again. Log off and rejoin again, please.